being nimble and being able to adjust, I guess, in the internet age to a new way of doing things. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Hey, just before you go, we've only got about 30 seconds left because you have become a bit of an advocate for small business. Is there one big tip for a small business owner out there?
Yes, absolutely. Is make sure you know, I guess, the legalities around your business when launching things. Otherwise, make sure you check out other platforms such as Manaki for advice when launching your business. Or even
Manaki, that's a good site. Thank you very much. And Anna, Jeremy, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere Akine, the Trans-Tasman bubble bounces in. Newborns, grannies and poppers meet for the first time. Others are reunited after yonks apart. Spoiler alert, there's some fierce hugging, a few tears and a lot of warm fuzzies. Checkpoint was on the first flight out of Auckland and at arrivals for those golden moments. We're live to Australia too. Fishing guides say they can't catch a break despite quarantine-free travel. And 2 Auckland MIQ hotels are turning away guests following COVID transmission inside the facilities. Phone taps and stashes of cash and noodle packets, the case of an alleged international cocaine ring, and the 91-year-old cop who is still on the beat.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leatao at tēnei. Families and friends are reuniting on both sides of the Tasman as the long-awaited travel bubble finally opened. The quarantine-free flights between New Zealand and Australia are part of the world's second travel bubble and have brought much excitement and emotion to the nation's airports today. Our reporter Kate Gregan is at Auckland International Airport.
Many people walking through the international arrivals gate were overwhelmed with emotion. The first passengers started to arrive shortly after the plane touchdown at 12:30 p.m. and were met with cheers and claps as they entered the arrival hall. A choir sang an extended version of Dave Dobbin's Welcome Home No Mai Rā as many travellers embraced their family members for the first time in more than a year. At Auckland Airport, Kate Gregan.
Madison Turley was at Wellington Airport to welcome her sister and brother-in-law and her 1-year-old niece.
Oh, it just means so much. You sort of miss them every day and you can't do anything to see them. It's sort of missing a part of your life in a way. You can't go there all the time, but yeah, no, it means heaps.
Madison Turley says it's been a year and a half since she has seen her family. The Prime Minister has touted the economic benefits of today's Trans-Tasman travel bubble, saying the benefits could reach $1 billion. Jacinda Ardern says Tourism New Zealand has forecast a $1 billion boost to the economy. She says she knows how exciting the bubble will be for many New Zealanders.
And particularly there's a few friends of mine I'm really looking forward to seeing. In fact, when I was on the podium, I'd only just announced the date and one of my friends sent me a copy of the ticket that they'd just purchased online. So I know how enthusiastically this is being greeted and I'm really pleased about that.
Jacinda Ardern says New Zealand retains the right to alter the arrangement at any time. A critical migrant worker separated from her husband for more than 400 days says she feels no joy about reuniting because the separation has been so traumatic. The government's revealed new border exemptions, which means some migrant families will soon be able to reunite. As a critical health worker, Kathy Lergervenek can apply for her husband to join her in New Zealand. He left New Zealand for work just before the borders slammed shut in March and has been unable to return, leaving Ms Lergervenek to care for their 2 children alone.
I don't even express a joy. I don't feel in any joy because we have been spoiled by a country, that took my husband away from me and from my kids for so long.
Kathy Lergervenek says she will feel relieved once her husband arrives. Wellington City Council is to undergo a major overhaul after a review found poor governance and behaviour which undermines public trust and confidence. The Mayor commissioned the review in late February to address ongoing problems around the council table. The report, authored by Peter Winder and published today, found the current structure breeds strongly held and divided opinions. Mayor Andy Foster says he is in broad agreement with the findings.
The report
should be a wake-up call to everybody that the way in which things have been done was causing damage or had the potential to cause damage to the reputation of the organisation, standing of the organisation, and certainly impeding our ability to do our job as best we can.
Andy Foster says he will look to replace the existing portfolio structure with a committee-based one. The trial of 3 men charged with running a global cocaine importation ring began in the High Court at Auckland today. The trio, all from Europe, are facing 7 charges relating to 4 kilograms of the Class A drug shipped here from South America 4 years ago. The Crown told the court one of the accused, Rysard Wilk, met the shipment in Auckland. A crash north of Wellington is causing massive delays for people on State Highways 1 and 2. People are being told to delay leaving the city if they can. It's 4 minutes past 5. Fans of English Premier League football clubs named as part of the breakaway European Super League have joined forces to condemn the move. Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, Manchester City, Manchester United and Tottenham are among 12 clubs who have agreed to join the new competition. The Premier League clubs will join AC Milan, Atletico Madrid, Barcelona, Inter Milan, Juventus and Real Madrid. Supporters groups for Chelsea, Tottenham Hotspur and Arsenal have all come out in strong opposition to the news. Governing bodies FIFA and UEFA are also condemning the plans. Meanwhile, Leicester City are through to their first FA Cup final for more than 50 years with a 1-0 win over Southampton. Leicester will play Chelsea in the final. The defending IndyCar Series champion Scott Dixon has finished third at the opening race of the season in Alabama. Chasing a 7th IndyCar Series title, Dixon started from 5th on the grid. Fellow New Zealander Scott McLaughlin, who's in his rookie IndyCar season, was 14th of 24 drivers.
Now I got held up a little bit mid-race, which was a little bit disappointing. I just didn't know the capacity of the car and was a bit nervous. I just wanted to get one race under my belt, so ended up doing a reasonable move, but it just took too long.
Spain's Alex Palou won the season opener. The Blues prop Alex Hodgman has been suspended for 3 weeks after being sent off for a dangerous tackle in the team's Super Rugby Aotearoa loss to the Highlanders in Dunedin on Friday night. It means he'll miss games against the Crusaders and Chiefs and possibly the final. That's the news.
New Zealanders set foot in Australia.
Videos and phone calls, they're not the same as being able to give your family a hug, be around each other outside of a video screen.
A world-first arrangement.
To be able to have that quarantine-free arrangement, I don't know anyone else in the world that's doing that, so it is a very big day.
Families reunited.
As soon as Jacinda said that we were allowed to fly on the 19th, I went online and I booked straight away.
All aboard. Morning Report, weekdays from 6, on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight. Tomorrow, Northland, partly cloudy, rain developing tomorrow morning, heavy and possibly thundery from tomorrow afternoon, then easing by tomorrow night. Auckland to Taranaki, also Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Cloudy periods and isolated light showers. Rain spreading south from tomorrow afternoon with heavy falls possible later in the day. Gisborne to Wairarapa, Whanganui and Taihape to Wellington, also Bulla, Nelson and Marlborough. Mainly fine with high cloud. Isolated showers in the west tonight, cloud increasing tomorrow with scattered rain spreading south from later in the afternoon. More widespread about Golden Bay and the Marlborough Sounds. For Westland and Fiordland, cloudy periods and a few showers, more frequent south of Haast. Canterbury, Otago and Southland mainly fine with high cloud at times, a few showers about Stewart Island today. And Chatham Islands mainly fine. RNZ National at 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora, this is Checkpoint ko Lisa Owen Takawingwa. Like a scene from Love Actually, emotions have been running high at airports across the country today as the travel bubble with Australia burst into action. For the first time in a year, international flights have touched down in Wellington and Queenstown, while arrival gate reunions are back on the cards in Auckland and Christchurch. Thousands of people are making the journey across the Tasman, with flights landing throughout the afternoon. Our reporter Nick Trubridge is at Auckland International Airport. Nick, quite a day to be out there, I imagine full of emotion, a little tear in your eye too?
Oh, Lisa, maybe a little tear in my eye at one stage. Look, plenty of hugs, plenty of tears, and as you say, plenty of emotion out here today, and plenty of music. Dave Dobbin on repeat out here for about 5 hours. Not the man himself, but a little bit of a backup band. As you can see, there's a crowd gathered here right now, and that's because a flight has just landed from Sydney. And as you can see on the arrivals board behind me, there are still a few flights to come in tonight. We've got a couple of flights from Melbourne, a couple from Brisbane, a couple from the Gold Coast, and maybe one or two from Sydney as well. We're just waiting for those passengers to come in on those flights this afternoon, but we were here when that first flight arrived this afternoon. Here comes JQ201, an historic trip, the first Trans-Tasman bubble flight to land in New Zealand. The Jetstar flight touching down in Auckland just after 12:30, and with that, Auckland's once deserted international terminal erupts with emotion. Children wait to reunite with parents. Nieces and nephews gather to meet uncles and aunts. Wives wait for long-lost husbands. Some here have been cut off from family for over a year. You're home?
Yes, first after 15 months.
How does it feel?
It's a great feeling. It is great. So absolutely joyful. And my mum was waiting for me for the last 15 months.
This man is simply overcome with joy and relief.
It's amazing. It's an amazing feeling. Can't use the words to describe.
So you're almost emotional, aren't you?
Yes, sorry. Thank you. Thank you very much.
The passengers stream out. In the middle of it all, a mother and daughter embrace.
Oh, we waited so long. It's just fantastic.
Some here had plans to see loved ones just as the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Family reunions were put on hold until today. When did you last see Mum? 3 years ago?
Yeah. So that's it's a bit of a big deal for me. So no.
Grown men stand waiting in tears.
Oh, because I'm a real mummy's boy. Yeah. So to see my old lady after 3 years, it's pretty. It gets pretty overwhelming, really.
For this mum, the trip is short, but so sweet.
Feels great. Feels great to be home, even if it is only for 6 days. It's freaking awesome.
And this mum says the mummy's boy rumours are true.
He is. And the rest will probably agree as well. The rest of them will all agree. Yeah, he is mummy's boy.
Across the terminal, aunties are finally getting to cuddle their nephews and nieces.
It's, believe it or not, just over, when we locked down, so a year and a half, she was, I think, 4 days old the last time I saw her, so.
And who is this, your niece or your?
My niece, my sister and her partner, so it's really good to be home.
Elsewhere, a husband and wife are reunited for the first time in months.
Oh my God, I'm so happy. Thank you to Jacinda. Yeah. I feel like it is living without him is feeling like ages. Yeah. I'm waiting for him every second. Yeah.
With the flight done and hugs out of the way, home comforts are next on the menu. Have you just come back too?
Yes, I've just come back.
When was the last time you were here?
About a year and a half. Yeah, it's been good to come back. It's been an awesome welcoming coming in the doors. Everyone in customs has been great, and then to walk into some homemade music. All we need now is a bakery pie, some fish and chips, sold.
Mum's agreeable. It's home time via the bakery. How does it feel, Mum, to have her back?
I miss my girl. I really did. I'm glad to see my daughter back.
Taking her home?
Yes, after we get a pie.
The hugs, kisses and tears continue into the afternoon. Finally, some normality returns to this abnormal COVID-19 world. For Checkpoint, Nick Trubridge.
And if you were listening to that on radio, we'll put the video up from our two Nicks, Nick Trubridge and Nick Munro, online so you can check it out. I don't know if you'll have a dry eye after that one. Excitement, relief and joy. That's how passengers described the feeling of boarding the first Trans-Tasman flight out of Auckland to Sydney under the new quarantine-free bubble. While the flight wasn't packed, those on board were buzzing as they neared Australian shores. Tourism reporter Tess Brunton and videographer Simon Rogers spoke to the passengers before they boarded the flight and then hopped on board themselves.
It's been tough for Auckland residents William and Jennifer Wong. They haven't been able to meet their first grandchild, who was born 3 months ago.
So happy and excited when was waiting for Jacinda at 4 o'clock to announce it and then book a flight straight away for us to travel. And it was so excited that she opened the bubble and it's school holiday and I can have 2 weeks off from my work.
They were hoping the bubble would open earlier.
Apply leave in February. I thought that the bubble will open, but then the bubble doesn't open. Was so disappointed. Yeah, but now, yeah, we're so excited. Yeah, the first flight out to go and see our grandson.
Now they can travel. They have something special in mind.
But we told my daughter that we are leaving tomorrow, but we'll try to surprise him at the door. That's what we are actually doing today.
What do you expect her reaction's going to be when she realises?
Oh, it'll be just like jump for joy. That's amazing.
They can't wait to meet him after only seeing him on a video screen.
A lot of cuddles.
Lots of cuddles. Maybe take him shopping, buy him some stuff.
Yeah, we've been we've been receiving a lot of phone, video calling and all this, and so we're looking at the babies and really needed to be there and spend the time with him.
1.5-year-old Nicola hasn't seen her grandparents in the small coastal town of Eden since the bushfires last year. Mum Steph has been missing her mum's home cooking.
I probably will break down in tears as soon as we see land. I'm going to be, oh my gosh, I did miss it heaps. I try not to think about it, but actually it's going to be super special, I think, seeing my family.
Marshall last saw her family 15 months ago. Hugging them was top of her list.
Hallelujah. I'm just ecstatic, It's the last time I saw my baby. She just had her second child, and I left when she was 7 days old. So the universe has opened up.
Waikato resident Daphne Allen can't wait to see her daughter and 17-month-old grandson. They managed to see each other just before lockdown, but it's been a long wait since then, with only phone and video calls.
He's only just getting to sort of really recognise us on the FaceTime, but no, it'd be really great to see him in person and, we've missed out on a lot in this development.
She started booking flights to see them in the Gold Coast before the announcement had finished.
Yeah, it means a lot, but when I hop in their car, that's when I'll be able to relax because there's been so much to sort of organise to get there, so yeah, it means heaps.
Is there anything that you're most looking forward to doing when you actually are able to be over there?
Just give them a big hug and just, play with my little grandson and be awesome. Yeah.
Taiwan has been waiting for the bubble to open so she can fly home to Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea. It means a bit more travel certainty for her.
Thank God, really looking forward to it because I've been stuck here since graduating from high school.
She could barely believe she'd be home by later in the day.
A relief, yeah, definitely. To be back and see family, old friends, yeah.
Maria Poasa is ready for the big family reunion.
Looking forward to see my children, my daughter and my son and their wife and kids, my grandchildren, because I miss them.
On board the flight, passengers donned their masks and settled down for the trip across the Tasman Sea. More than 5,000 passengers are flying today, with Air New Zealand offering roughly 30 flights. Its Chief Operating Officer, Carrie Hurihanganui, says they're excited the wait is over.
It's lovely this morning, just the smiles all round. Everyone is so excited to be here, and very much we've talked about it. It's a bit like riding a bike, actually, that as people have gone through to go, that's right, I remember this, and loving every minute of it.
She says the level of demand has been promising.
Well, folks, if you didn't feel that, I don't know what would wake you up. Sydney. A very warm welcome to Sydney, everyone. And for your safety, you must remain seated with your seatbelt fastened until the seatbelt sign is turned off. Also, please be careful when opening the overhead lockers as items surely would have moved.
In Sydney, travellers were greeted by loved ones, a large sign saying "We missed you" with a silver fern, and 3 drag queens welcoming them to Australian shores. While today's travel was mainly reuniting family and friends, Air New Zealand is expecting that will shift towards holiday goers closer to the winter school break. In Sydney for Checkpoint, Ko Tess Brunton, Tēnei.
Well, Tess, where the bloody hell are you?
G'day Lisa, I am in Sydney and behind me, if for anyone who's watching, you'll see the Sydney Harbour Bridge and the Sydney Opera House, and you may even be able to glimpse the Sydney Ferry.
Can see the ferry and can see the train going past behind you. Wow, must be pretty strange there. What was the mood of the travellers on the way over?
I think jubilant would be a good way of describing it. Excited, joyful. I mean, a lot of the people that we spoke to, or all the people we spoke to, were ready for a reunion. They were missing out on family. There was one grandmother who had only seen her grandchild for 7 days, and then that was the last time that they saw her. So you've got a lot of families who just really want to be reuniting and getting back, having home-cooked meals, playing some board games, and just being able to hug each other. And that's something that today has become a reality for far more people.
So what was it like under this new quarantine-free bubble? What things did you have to do, or what was different about it?
Well, it was quite straightforward in Auckland Airport. So we went through and security was fairly similar. We did have to do a declaration for Australia before, and also one for New South Wales. Now, those declarations involved going through and saying where you'd been, saying whether you had had any contact with anyone who may have COVID, as well as making sure that you had no symptoms. When you actually arrived into Sydney, we ended up going through and we had to go and get our temperature checked. So that was one of the things that people were lined up for. And then we had to go through the declaration for New South Wales to ensure that we had made sure that we weren't getting anyone sick and we weren't putting anyone at risk.
So Tess, the temperature check, was that sort of like a laser temperature gun to your forehead?
It was, and so I mean it was perfectly harmless, and it didn't take longer than what seemed like a couple of seconds, so it was very easy and very painless.
So when you got there, what was the actual reception like? You get through customs, was there a welcoming party?
There certainly was. For one, there was a lot of loved ones who were reuniting, so there were a lot of tears shed and a lot of emotional moments for people who haven't seen each other in most of them over a year. And of course, it wouldn't be a reunion without some drag queens there in their sequins. So there was some music as well. Kylie Minogue, Can't Get You Out of My Head. So it was quite a special sort of reunion with a big black sign in the background that said, "We've missed you," and a silver fern.
Hey, and this is a pretty special trip for you as well, isn't it, Tess?
It is. It is. Last time I saw my parents was more than a year ago. Last time I was in Australia, it was on fire. My hometown was very much at risk, and the day that I left was meant to be the worst day for my hometown. So the smoke was still thick in the air. So to be coming back to blue skies, no smoke, and to have the view in the background of the Sydney Harbour Bridge and the Opera House, it's pretty special to know that I'm only a couple of days away from seeing my whānau and from seeing friends I haven't seen for more than 18 months. Video calls and phone calls really it's not the same.
Have a wonderful reunion, Tess. That is Tess Brunton, who's joining us there from in front of an epic shot there of the Sydney Opera House, and you could see the Harbour Bridge in the background. She was on the first plane leaving Auckland Airport for the Trans-Tasman quarantine-free bubble. It is 22 minutes past 5, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. And still to come on the program, why are 2 isolation hotels in Auckland turning away guests? We're keen for your feedback. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let us know if you were on any of those flights coming or going, if you were in the welcoming party at the airport, meeting someone that you haven't seen for yonks. We would love to hear from you. To other news now. A migrant family split by the COVID-19 border closure for more than 400 days say they feel no joy about the prospect of reuniting because the separation has been so traumatic. The government's revealed new border exemptions, which means some migrant families will soon be able to reunite. But there are thought to be thousands of other families still left in the lurch, with no idea when they'll be able to see their loved ones. Here's political reporter Katie Scotcher.
Kathy Legorvanek and her husband have been separated for more than 400 days. He left New Zealand for work just before the borders slammed shut and has been unable to return. Kathy has had to juggle caring for 2 young children alone and studying to become a physiotherapist since.
You lose 50% of your life because when you decide to marry somebody, you do it on purpose. You want to share things with him, and you do that by love. You know, we are married since 10 years and live together since 15 years. So we are a strong couple.
Today, Kathy and her husband got the news they'd been waiting for.
I don't even express a joy. You know, I don't feel in any joy because we have been spoiled by a country, you know, that took my husband away from me and from my kids for so long.
Kathy's husband falls under one of the 3 new border exemptions announced by Immigration Minister Chris Farfoy.
These latest exceptions are expected to allow hundreds more migrants to come to New Zealand and join their families.
The government's fixing a discrepancy which meant migrant workers who entered the country just before the borders closed couldn't bring their families, but those who came after could. Soon, those families caught out can apply to enter New Zealand. The partners and children of a very small number of highly skilled non-healthcare temporary workers will also be able to travel here. Immigration Minister Chris Farfoy explains who might be covered by that exemption.
People in very senior jobs and companies haven't been able to bring some of their families back. There are criteria there, depending on whether they're here for 6 months or longer. Some of that is salary and some of that is projects that they may work on.
Possibly the largest border exemption will be for the families of critical healthcare workers. They too will be able to apply for visas to enter the country, but the government doesn't actually know how many will do so. There are about 6,000 critical healthcare workers in the country right now.
There are many unknowns here. How many of those 6,000 have families? How big those families are? That kind of information isn't necessarily collected when they first apply for a visa. Ascertaining demand and capacity in numbers is a little difficult.
National's Erica Stanford says many migrant families will be relieved, but the government's leaving thousands of others behind.
For a government who talks about kindness and putting people first, this decision today really says a lot, actually, that they don't value these people.
She wants the government to give certainty to those who aren't helped by the new exemptions.
At the moment, there is no light at the end of the tunnel for them, and they're still trapped in this awful sort of limbo, trying to figure out whether or not they should leave. And I tell you what, we don't want them to leave. They're desperately needed teachers and engineers and tech workers. We need them here.
ACT leader David Seymour is also celebrating the news, but says if the government worked proactively, those split families could have been in New Zealand already. He points to the MIQ rooms sitting empty thanks to the Trans-Tasman bubble.
We should have a system to look into the future based on MIQ bookings and ask how will we use this space to maximise overall well-being, rather than getting to a stage where there are 1,500 MIQ rooms empty and just saying, oh well, because that oh well is incredibly painful for many of these separated families.
The government has signalled it will be looking at further border exemptions in the coming months. Atuiti whare parimata mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Katie Scott Churaho.
A China expert says a speech by the Foreign Minister on China is unusual, with criticism previously unheard of from New Zealand. Nanaia Mahuta spoke at the New Zealand-China Council's meeting in Wellington this morning. She spoke about the need to diversify trade from China and listed her concerns about Xinjiang, Hong Kong, the Pacific and cyber security. Here's political reporter Charlie Drever with the details.
Nanaia Mahuta says New Zealand's relationship with China is one of our most significant.
China is an influential, regional and global actor. It has been our largest trading partner since 2017.
The minister compared the relationship between the two countries of that of a taniwha and the dragon.
I see the taniwha and the dragon as symbols of the strength of our particular customs, traditions and values that aren't always the same, but need to be maintained and respected.
But among the praise of the recently upgraded free trade agreement with China, she spoke of diversifying trade and urged against putting all our eggs in one basket with China. On the Pacific Reset, she raised concerns about the indebtedness of Pacific nations to China.
China can play a role in the long-term economic recovery and resilience of the region, but there is a substantial difference between financing loans and contributing to greater ODA investment, in particular to the Pacific.
Nanaia Mahuta says New Zealand has raised matters privately with China on many occasions.
We will not ignore the severity of impact of any particular country's actions if they conflict with our long-standing and formal commitment to universal human rights. Sometimes we will therefore find it necessary to speak out publicly on issues, like we have on developments in Hong Kong, the treatment of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, and cyber incidents.
University of Canterbury's Professor Anne-Marie Brady says it's very unusual for New Zealand to list all of its concerns with China.
Like a whole list of concerns that New Zealand has, and we haven't seen anything like that before.
Anne-Marie Brady says New Zealand is under a lot of pressure from China.
Our diplomats are getting regular démarches, regular statements of concern face-to-face, and other small states are also getting a lot of pressure. So I suspect this is preemptive, that New Zealand is telling China, we are going to disagree with you on some points.
She says New Zealand is doing what it can in a very difficult international environment. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Ko Charlie Drever, DNA.
Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, a fractured Wellington City Council is headed for a shake-up. The fishing guides that can't catch a break, even with a Trans-Tasman bubble. And we're at the airport in the capital for another dose of warm fuzzies. We would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Do get in touch. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. We'd love to hear from you if you've met again with relatives or loved ones after being apart for, well, almost 400 days. Do get in touch. Time now for the headlines with Susanna.
There have been emotional scenes at airports on both sides of the Tasman as families and friends reunite after not seeing each other since the pandemic began. About 5,000 people flew between the two countries today in the first travel bubble to open since one between Hong Kong and Singapore late last year. The Prime Minister says Tourism New Zealand has forecast $1 billion boost to the economy from quarantine-free travel with Australia. Jacinda Ardern says New Zealand retains the right to alter the arrangement at any time. A health worker says she feels no joy about reuniting with her husband because the separation has been so traumatic. The government has revealed new border exemptions allowing the families of critical workers on temporary visas to join them. Kathy Legervenek's husband left New Zealand for work in March last year and had been unable to return until the rules changed today. The trial of 3 men charged with running a global cocaine importation ring began in the High Court at Auckland today. The European trio are facing 7 charges relating to 4 kilograms of the Class A drug in late 2016 and early 2017. The Crown told the court the cocaine came via a Russian sailor's ship from South America, and Rysard Wilk and his son flew from Poland to meet it in Auckland. A Wellington City councillor is criticising the mayor for rushing into substantial changes to the council's structure. A review published today found poor governance and behaviour, which undermines public trust and confidence. It recommended replacing the existing portfolio structure with a committee one. But Councillor Jill Day says Andy Foster has already unveiled the committees and positions. The health watchdog has found a fertility clinic breached health codes by mistakenly starting a pregnant woman on an IVF cycle. The report by the Health and Disability Commissioner finds Fertility Associates Holdings in breach of health codes for failures in its care of the woman. The Deputy Commissioner, Rose Hall, has called for changes at Fertility Associates, changes to testing protocol and an audit of staff compliance. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō, this is Checkpoint ko Lisa Owen Takuingwa. Closed for bookings, 2 Auckland isolation hotels are being emptied of returnees, pending an investigation into how COVID was transmitted inside the facilities. Genome sequencing shows the virus spread between 2 returnees at the Grand Mercure. They arrived back on different flights, days apart. And in a different outbreak, a returnee, a cleaner and 2 security guards at the Grand Millennium are also in the same chain of transmission. There's about 224 isolating returnees across both hotels, and once they've all completed MIQ, there will be a review into potential sources of spread at the facilities, including the ventilation systems. Well, joining us now is the boss of Managed Isolation and Quarantine, Brigadier Jim Bliss. Good evening, Brigadier. Why do you need to clear all the guests out?
Yeah, hi Lisa. Hey, can I just start off by saying, firstly, that the risk presented by the ventilation systems has always been assessed by health experts as being very low, and that the risk to staff and returnees contracting COVID-19 within the facilities is low. So nevertheless, when we did the Pullman review, we also undertook to do a systems-wide review of all of our facilities, and that was started as a desktop review, and then as the opportunity allowed or presented itself, we'd conduct a physical review of each of our facilities. So the opportunity is now to do that physical review of the Grand Mercure and the Grand Millennium. So once we've had those remaining returnees depart on the 21st and the 27th of April, we'll undertake that physical review whilst those facilities are empty.
But if it's safe and the risk is so low, why do you need to get them out?
So, like I say, once they've departed after their 14 days of isolation, that then gives us the opportunity to then go in free of any returnees. We don't have to work around them. We can then deep clean the facility, have the staff available, and really get into the nuts and bolts of doing a physical assessment of those ventilation systems, which we can't do probably easily with returnees occupying all of those rooms.
So, at the time of the Pullman outbreak, a commitment was given to do the same upgrades that the Pullman was getting across all 32 MIQ facilities. So, do the Grand Mercure and the Grand Millennium have updated ventilation systems?
Yeah, so each of the 32 facilities, of course, being different buildings with different age and different
Understand,
design.
but can we just, sorry to interrupt, we've got limited time. Let's concentrate on these 2 hotels. Do they both have updated ventilation facilities?
So they have a ventilation facility which is appropriate to operate as a hotel and have, I suppose, design parameters that allow them to do so to meet their building warrant of fitness. What we'd like to do is go in and take this opportunity with ventilation experts.
So, Brigadier, they do not have the promised upgrade. It hasn't happened there. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
No. So the upgrade that's occurred to the Pullman is a piece of work that has been done since we did the ventilation review in the Pullman. That's been a significant piece of work that the building owner has undertaken in the lift shafts and the vertical rises where the accommodation sections are to upgrade those ventilation facilities.
So at the Grand Mercure and the Grand Millennium, I just want to be really clear on this, and I'm still not clear from what you're telling me. So the Grand Mercure and the Grand Millennium, do they have updated ventilation systems, including what's called HEPA filtration in the lifts, or not?
So we're working with them to look at the ventilation system. Not all of our facilities have HEPA filters fitted to all of the lifts or the hallways, as we did at the time to allow the Pullman to operate.
So these two don't have those. These two don't have those upgraded
I would have to
systems.
go back and check, Lisa. I have to go back and check exactly on what they have in the system itself.
But that's critical, isn't it, Brigadier? That's critical, because you're saying that this review, that you're clearing all the guests out, there is going to be a focus on the ventilation system, and you can't at this moment tell me what kind of ventilation they have and whether it's been upgraded or not.
So they have the extent ventilation system which comes as part of the building, and then there are is the potential to use other filtration systems like purifiers or to attach HEPA filters, and largely we did that in the Pullman once the ventilation review was done.
Understand, but there was a commitment made at the time that the upgrades that were going into the Pullman were going to happen across the other 32 quarantine facilities.
Yes, and I hope to get back to you with which facilities have had those upgrades, physical upgrades, acknowledging that these systems come from overseas and the global supply chain can sometimes determine when those facilities or when those pieces of equipment are available.
When the Pullman happened, you stopped putting guests above the 4th floor because of the quality of ventilation in the lifts. Have you got guests above the 4th floor in the Grand Mercure and the Grand Millennium?
So each facility is different in the ventilation system and how it works either between rooms and between floors. So the review will allow us to determine what's the best loading of each of those facilities and the best mitigations of the I suppose you'd say the potential risk, the low risk between each of the rooms.
So at the moment you still have guests residing above the 4th floor at both of these hotels?
Yes, but I'd just like to point out that that's not necessarily applicable in the Grand Mercure or the Grand Millennium because they operate in different ventilation systems and because they're in different types of buildings and different designs.
One of the other recommendations that's been made that you're putting into place immediately, as I understand it, is at the Grand Mercure there'll be additional testing on day 7. Why only at that hotel?
So that's because that cohort that's in there at the moment doesn't leave until the 27th of April. So we're just using that as an opportunity to say, let's put in, with an abundance of caution, a 7-day test so we can determine if anything was wrong, we'd pick it up early.
So what do you actually think is going on here?
Going on with ventilation?
In terms of the internal spread of COVID-19, which is the heart of your investigation here, the fact that people have potentially got COVID in a facility that's supposed to protect them from it. So how do you think, your initial thoughts on how this has happened?
So I think, as Dr. Bloomfield said last week, we've learned a lot over the recent months about the variants of the viruses and aerosol transmission. Is playing a lot more in the thinking these days. It used to be, physical contact with either between people or surface touching and the like. Aerosol contact or aerosol transmission is now seen as being, whilst unlikely, one of the more possible causes for transmission. So we need to investigate that further and fully.
But you knew that when you put out the press release on the Pullman dated the 16th of February 2021. It says there's increasing evidence people can get infected by very small droplets, right? So you knew of the elevated risk then, yet it doesn't seem that you've done all the upgrades that are necessary to protect people.
So we're still operating the facilities, and like I say, coming before, very, very low risk of any transmission within the facilities operating as they are. And I just come back to that's a public health perspective. The IPC audits that go in and have been conducted since the Pullman review all confirm that there's a very low risk to any of our returnees or any of our staff in these facilities. We're looking to take the opportunity to provide the maximum amount of mitigation that we can in these facilities for the safety of our returnees and staff.
So this is 652 rooms that are going to be out of action. That's 900 returnees. Do you have space to shuffle those bookings to other places?
Yeah, so one of the, I suppose, the flow-on benefits of the quarantine-free travel at the moment has been the increase in capacity that we have in the system. So even with holding 500 rooms aside for contingency for quarantine-free travel, the reduction in the number of allocation spaces in MIAS from the quarantine-free travel from Australia means that we do have the ability to meet this requirement and not be impinging on anyone's ability to return to New Zealand.
Can you give us a date for when those hotels will be back in action?
Yeah, that's the part of the review is to determine what is the remediation plan, if any, that is required for each of those locations. As we said with the Pullman was to be by the end of April, and we're on track or ahead of track to open the Pullman back up to full capacity either later this week or next week.
But the other two, no time frame for when they'll be back in use?
It really will depend on getting the experts into there, the ventilation experts, to have a look and to work out if there's a scope of work, what is that scope of work and when it will be finished.
Appreciate you joining us this evening. That is the boss of MIQ, Brigadier Jim Bliss. It is time now to get to business news with Nona Peltier. Nona, joining me in the studio. Lovely to see you. Sorry we're late to you. Services sector bounced back into expansion, you say. So what does this mean? Business as usual?
Not really. No. I mean, it isn't an expansion, and it's been after 5 months of contraction being going backwards. So good news from the point of view of we're back into expansion. We're at 52.4 points, but that's not nearly near the, I guess, the long-term average. That's only 1 month of expansion, and no one's sort of jumping to any conclusions of what that might mean for the wider economy. It follows, though, you might recall on Friday, we talked about the manufacturing index.
Actual orders.
Actual 63.6 points, which is like a record high, and also because of strong orders and production. Same thing we're seeing here with the services sector. But the big drag and the unknown on the economy is, of course, the labor market. And we're seeing this across all sorts of industries, but it's spreading through into services and manufacturing. Of course, we knew about construction previously, but it's across all types. So whether or not they'll be able to meet the demand, that's another question. We don't know that yet, and I guess time will tell. It's just one extra piece of the question we have over the economy.
Yeah, because people whose jobs disappeared or hours were slashed considerably may have gone off and found themselves work in other professions.
Yes, and that's right. But we also, there's also a number of questions about supply chain and the extra costs of shipping and so on. Can the services sector pass those costs on? That's another question, because we know that consumers are reluctant to pay additional pricing, and the housing market being uncertain now, that buoyancy that we saw earlier in the year might have been dashed somewhat, because people are going to have to, if they own a second property, they're going to have to pay tax on that interest as opposed to having it as a deduction. All of these things factor into how much consumers want to spend. So pricing's a big issue for the services sector too. And of course, that includes such things as restaurants and bars.
Yeah. Okay. The wrestling match over Tilt Renewables.
Yes, well,
Has it come to a close yet?
Almost. Okay. Almost. Certainly. Okay, so what happened last week was another offer was made, and it was a superior offer to the one that initially had been accepted by Mercury. Mercury had made an offer along with its Australian partners, that's Queensland Investment and an energy company called AGL Energy. They bid $3 billion for Tilt, and that offer looked like it was going to be accepted through a scheme of arrangement when the Canadian fund came in and said, we'll offer a bit more, 20 cents more a share. So late on Friday, after the company had been put in a trading halt, Mercury and its partners upped their offer to $8.10, which is better than the $8 offer they were going to get from this Canadian firm. But they also said this time, though, we're taking off the option of you countering with any other proposals. So this has got to be the last, sort of the end of the offer
Best
round.
And final.
Yes, but it's still subject to an approval from the independent directors and the High Court, because it is a scheme of arrangement. And that's not going to be wrapped up until August. So, you might hear about this one more time at least.
Okay, Nona, what numbers do you bring?
Well, good numbers, because the markets are doing really well. Across the world, people are feeling like the money's going to keep on getting printed there. So, cheap interest. It's got to be good for the markets, and that certainly is showing up here. We are up 83 points today, 2/3% increase to 12,768. That's in for the NZX Top 50 Index. And the dollar is still steady, sitting at 71.4 US cents, 92.3 Australian, in case our interests travelers want to know, and 51.5 British pence.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with our business news there. It is 14 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. And after 6, we're at Wellington Airport for a top-up of hugs and cuddles. For the first time in almost 400 days, international tourists landed at Queenstown Airport to tears, cheers, offers of free bungee jumps, and relief that not only were friends and family reunited, but that the Australian tourists were back. Qantas Flight 121 touched down shortly before 2:30 p.m. to cheers from airport ground crew, with about 100 passengers on board. It's the financial lifeline the tourist town has long wanted and marks what many hope will be the start of the town's recovery after it was decimated by the tourist border closures. Belinda McCammon was there.
A crowd of about 100 people, including media, airport staff and the town's mayor, crowded into the narrow international arrivals area this afternoon, ready to welcome the first international visitors into Queenstown in over a year. Entering this small arrival area to be faced with a glare of cameras, a live band and a personal welcome from the Mayor of Queenstown, Jim Bolt, is not your typical airport welcome. But Queenstown has waited a long time for this moment, so could be excused for maybe going a little bit over the top. Among those waiting were Riverton couple Dennis and Linnell Woods, waiting for their brother-in-law.
They live in Sydney, but they have a home and they have a house in Queenstown, so they love coming here and they come here as often as possible, but obviously haven't been here for 14 months, I think it's 14 months.
About 14 to 15 months. So they are, bursting to get back to their house.
And their brother-in-law, Rob Miller, was one of the first off the plane, dressed in a tux for the occasion. An emotional Rob Miller said he had been away for 13 long months and he was thrilled to be back. He says the land and the people are so important to him, he had to be on the first flight.
Well, it's that important. The land means so much to us that we had to be here straight away, had to be the first ones.
You're based in Sydney, but you've got a home here, that's right?
That's correct.
Yeah, and so how long are you going to be here for this trip?
Well, I bought a one-way ticket.
But it wasn't just returning visitors reuniting with family. Among the passengers were honeymooners, Tram and Alexander, from Canberra, who were married last week and are here for 6 days.
We didn't know what to do for our honeymoon. We wanted to go somewhere else. We actually really wanted to go to New Zealand, but obviously everything was shut down. Then a few days, I think like 5 days before the wedding, they announced it was open or something. It was very recent. And we just booked straight away, and here we are.
Renee Marshall and her husband were originally planning to visit Queensland, but once the bubble was announced, she changed her plans and booked Queenstown. This is her third trip to the town, and she says she was excited to visit again.
I just love the mountains, and this time of year is quite beautiful, not being so chilly. And my husband's Italian and he's never been here, so I thought it'd be a great opportunity for us to have a beautiful holiday after such a problematic time.
But amongst all the celebration today, Queenstown leaders and tourist operators know it's not business as usual. Mayor Jim Bolt says COVID has been a wake-up call for the tourist-reliant town, and it must now focus on diversification of industries in the town.
This has been a short, sharp wake-up call for our district and the whole of the tourism industry. Where we sit, we are going to ensure that we work hard on diversifying our economy locally, but let's remember how special it is to have our visitors coming here.
The first Air New Zealand flight from Australia arrives tomorrow, with about 20 international flights due each week, building to about 60 flights during the ski season. In Queenstown for Checkpoint, Belinda McCammon.
The Prime Minister has hailed the opening of the new Trans-Tasman travel bubble as a world first milestone. Speaking at her post-cabinet press conference, Jacinda Ardern said Tourism New Zealand forecasting suggested the bubble could mean $1 billion boost to the economy.
It is truly exciting to be able to welcome our Tasman cousins quarantine-free to Aotearoa in what is a world-leading travel arrangement. Australia aside, we're not aware of any other countries allowing travel outside their borders in quite the same way as we are, whilst also maintaining a COVID-19 elimination strategy. In fact, in some countries, including, I understand, the United Kingdom, it remains illegal to leave the country on holiday. The bubble marks a significant step in New Zealand's reconnection with the world, and it's one we should all take a moment to be very, very proud of, because after all, it has taken a team effort.
Jacinda Ardern also sought to ease any New Zealanders' fears about the travel arrangement, saying the government's expert advisors deemed it low risk.
I have the same confidence in managing the Trans-Tasman arrangements that I do around managing our own country. Because essentially what we've created is a management regime that means, look, if we have a border incursion that happens in any state, we'll treat them in the same way that we would here. Put in a non-travel area around it, contact trace anyone who may be in contact with a case explicitly, and deal with any incursion in exactly the same way we do in New Zealand, which is to be very, very cautious, take a risk-based approach, and make sure we maintain that COVID-free status that's been so important to us.
She says New Zealand retains the right to close the bubble or alter the arrangement at any time if Australia widens its bubble to other countries. Australia's Foreign Minister Marise Payne will make use of the bubble this week, flying into New Zealand on Wednesday to meet with her Kiwi counterpart for the first time since the pandemic began. The Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison will also visit in the near future.
One of the very first things when I gave him a call to say that we would be making decisions around opening up the Trans-Tasman arrangement, we moved very quickly to when he would be coming to New Zealand. You'll remember it's our turn to host those leader-to-leader engagements. My last overseas trip was to Sydney in February of 2020. And we will be hosting here in New Zealand and looking to do that in the not-too-distant future. I imagine that we'll announce times for that in fairly short order. I'll be looking to showcase the best of New Zealand in that visit in a rather shameless way.
Ms Ardern has not made firm plans to visit Australia yet, but says when she does, it will be for work purposes, not recreation. A big structural overhaul is going down at Wellington City Council. It comes after a review found poor governance, missing leadership and behaviour which undermines public trust and confidence. The Mayor is proposing to completely revamp council processes, but some councillors are concerned over how he's going about it. Our Wellington reporter Harry Locke has more.
The review was authored by Peter Winder, the man who also led the review into the dysfunctional Tauranga City Council, where a commissioner was appointed in December last year. While Winder finds no such intervention is needed in Wellington, he does identify some serious problems with the way Wellington City Council is operating. Mayor Andy Foster, who commissioned the review, is in broad agreement.
The report should be a wake-up call to everybody that the way in which things have been done was causing damage or had the potential to cause damage to the reputation of the organisation, the standing of the organisation, and certainly impeding our ability to do our job as best we can.
The review finds while councillors agree on the problems facing the council, they lack a clear vision. It also says behaviour from councillors and the tone of debate is undermining public trust and confidence, that there are myriad examples of poor governance, and that the Mayor is not being an effective advocate and leader of the city. Most significantly, it finds the current structure, where councillors are given specific subject-related portfolios, is fuelling these problems. Winder says with a politically divided council like Wellington's, portfolios breed strongly held opinions, which contribute to the existing tensions around the table. But Councillor Simon Wolfe says he thinks they've been let off the hook.
I thought that we were very lucky, as in that there have been a lot of disjoints and acrimony, miscommunications, leaks, handovers, and certainly breaches of trust and confidence between councillors. Peter's report is fulsome, but it's also generous. It's our last chance.
The review contains 13 recommendations, including the establishment of a collective vision to change the meeting cycles and to get rid of the portfolio structure. The Mayor is agreeing to the shake-up and is proposing a new committee structure which will be formalised this Thursday. Instead of one committee meeting twice weekly, there will be 9 committees, meeting once every 4 weeks. Foster has already appointed a chair and deputy chair to each of those committees.
I very much want to get the right people in the right places, the right skills, the right attitudes, the right attributes. It'd be fair to say that not everybody's ever going to be happy in any of these sort of allocation processes. They never are. That's just the way of it. But I've tried to get it balanced and to get the right people in the right places.
And you're happy? You think you've done that?
I think to the best that I possibly can, yes.
But not everyone agrees. Councillor Fleur Fitzsimons says it's a shame there's not more diversity in those appointments.
The thrust of the Winder Review was really about saying in that chair and deputy chair role, there should be a mix of political values so that staff can work to decisions that are likely to be supported by the majority. Unfortunately, what the Mayor's done is really concentrated different political views in those leadership roles in a way that is unlikely to lead to that cohesion.
But Councillor Diane Calvert, the proposed chair of the Finance and Performance Committee, is encouraged the shake-up will make a difference.
This way, the work is divided up a bit better to make sure that we are really focused in on particular areas when we come together to meet and debate various matters.
Councillor Jill Day, appointed chair of the Social, Cultural and Community Services Committee, isn't so sure. She thinks the Mayor has rushed into making big changes.
The recommendations in the report were very clear that it would be helpful to use a facilitator to establish that process so that better collaboration can happen. We've tried to suggest that maybe it would be good to slow it down and call in a facilitator. I emailed the Mayor earlier today saying I think it would be good to slow it down. People aren't on board with this. I've had no response.
The review and recommendations will be discussed in a committee meeting this Thursday. For Checkpoint, Harry Locke.
A month after first erupting, an Icelandic volcano near Reykjavik continues to spew out lava and draw thousands of visitors. More fissures have opened up and so have more opportunities for tourism, including unique weddings. The BBC's Farhana Dawood reports.
Every love story is an adventure. So why settle on having just a wedding day when you could embark on an unforgettable, incredible experience?
With its dramatic landscape, Iceland has been long known as a country that can supply an astounding wedding backdrop. But the recent volcanic eruption, just 30 kilometres southwest of the capital Reykjavik, is now providing the ultimate location for those seeking an extraordinary spring wedding. It's the first eruption in the area for 800 years, and the lava-strewn area is safely accessible to the public. Several wedding planners are catering for this new market, but the nuptials are at the mercy of the elements, as bad weather or volcanic gas pollution can scupper the event. Plus, to get to your wedding location, you need to embark on a moderate hike for 45 to 90 minutes one way. There's no infrastructure at the site, such as toilets or paved paths, so you have to bring everything with you and take it all away when you leave. But for some, the hassle is worth it. As one newlywed said, the whole thing feels like a dream. Iceland has just recently reopened to foreign tourists who have been vaccinated against COVID. Tourism officials expect the volcanic eruption to be a big draw.
And that was the BBC's Farhana Dawood there with that report. We're just saying it sounded suspiciously like freedom camping in a wedding dress. After 6, we will go to Wellington Airport to touch base with all the people reuniting there. Lots of cuddles and hugs. We'll get our second dose of that. And the Prime Minister has just visited herself to see what was going on with the reunions. And Nick Trubridge, our reporter, is still out at Auckland International Airport while, as we speak, more flights are coming in. But not everyone is happy about the bubble. For some people it's come too late, so we'll speak to some of those people too.
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata with DNA. The Prime Minister has sought to ease any New Zealanders' fears about the new Trans-Tasman travel bubble, describing the arrangement as low risk. The first quarantine-free flight from Australia in more than a year has arrived in Auckland as part of the shared travel zone. Jacinda Ardern says she has not taken the decision to introduce the travel zone lightly. She says both countries have effective management tools to deal with any problems in a safe way. Today's milestone opening is worth an estimated $1 billion to the economy. A man welcoming his wife back into the country after 4 months away has described the opening of the Trans-Tasman bubble as awesome. Wilson was at Wellington Airport this afternoon as the first quarantine-free visitors arrived. He says his wife had gone to Perth to help with a family illness.
It's been a very stressful time, very stressful trying to get her into money isolation, which was booked for last week, and too hard to get a voucher, too hard.
Wilson says he's having time off work to relax with his wife while she gets used to being back in the country. A China expert says the Foreign Affairs Minister Nanaia Mahuta's speech on China was unusual for this country, with criticism previously unheard of from New Zealand. Nanaia Mahuta gave the speech at the New Zealand-China Council's meeting in Wellington this morning. She spoke about the need to diversify trade from China and also raised concerns about Xinjiang, Hong Kong, the Pacific and cybersecurity. University of Canterbury's Professor Anne-Marie Brady says the speech was full of points of concern. She says New Zealand is under a lot of pressure from China, so the speech is likely a preemptive response that the two countries are going to disagree on some points. A Wellington City councillor is criticising the mayor for rushing into making substantial changes to the council's governance structure. A review published today found poor governance and behaviour, which undermines public trust and confidence. It recommended revamping the existing portfolio structure to a committee structure with a chair and deputy chair for each committee. Mayor Andy Foster unveiled the new look committees and each position today. Councillor Jill Day says it's disappointing.
The recommendations in the report were very clear that it would be helpful to use a facilitator to establish that process so that better collaboration can happen. We've tried to suggest that maybe it would be good to slow it down and call in a facilitator. I emailed the mayor earlier today saying I think it would be good to slow it down. People aren't on board with this. I've had no response.
Wellington City Councillor Jill Day. Just over half of the adult population of the United States have now received at least one dose of a coronavirus vaccine, or about 130 million people. The BBC's David Willis has this report.
President Biden set a goal of administering 200 million doses of the vaccine within his first 100 days in office and seems set to meet that target comfortably. The US is currently administering around 3.5 million doses of the vaccine a day. Some scepticism remains, however, and the president joined celebrities and one of his predecessors, Barack Obama, in an hour-long TV special on Sunday night aimed at encouraging people here to get vaccinated.
David Willis in Washington. The trial of 3 men charged with running a global cocaine importation ring began today. The men from Europe are in the High Court at Auckland, facing 7 charges relating to 4 kilograms of the Class A drug. The Crown said the cocaine came via Russian sailor Alexander Cherushev's ship from South America, and Rysard Wilk flew from Poland with his son to meet it in Auckland. Prosecutor Sam Teppert said they were being watched. We'll find that audio at another time. Christchurch's long-standing former home to rugby and cricket, Lancaster Park, is starting the process of being transformed into a community sports field and park. Lancaster Park hosted sports events from 130 years until it was damaged in the Canterbury earthquakes, and the stadium was demolished in 2019. The council is now starting work to level and clean up the site and remove the foundations of the stadium, with the hope that sports can be played there from early next year. The memorial gates, built to commemorate Canterbury athletes' sacrifice during World War I, will be restored in time for the reopening of the park. It's coming up to 5 minutes past 6. The All Blacks hooker Dane Cole says it was always likely he would stay in New Zealand beyond this season. The 34-year-old World Cup winner has re-signed with the New Zealand Rugby and the Hurricanes until the end of 2023. Coles says he didn't receive any overseas offers or push his manager too hard to find deals offshore.
I just think being away from my kids and there would just be a bit too hard for me and my wife. And I think New Zealand's a great place to live, mate. I think I'm a homeboy. I think that was a big fact of living up Kapiti and travelling into Wellington and playing. It was a big draw card, and being passionate for the Hurricanes and New Zealand rugby.
Dane Coles. 12 of Europe's top football clubs are launching a breakaway Super League despite widespread opposition. English Premier League clubs Manchester United, Manchester City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea and Tottenham Hotspur are among the founding clubs. Heavily criticised by football authorities and UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, the competition will be a rival to UEFA established Champions League. After a Constellation Cup match last month, Australia's Caitlin Bassett and Silver Ferns defender Sulu Fitzpatrick will again meet on the netball court when the Northern Mystics host the Waikato Bay of Plenty Magic in Auckland tonight. Bassett will anchor the shooting circle for the Magic, while fellow recruit Temalisi Whakahokotau marks rising Mystics and Silver Fern shooter Grace Nweke. Roger Federer has confirmed he'll play in this year's French Tennis Open as he continues his return from injury. The 39-year-old has not played in Grand Slam since January 2020. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, marine scientist Dr. Lee Tate on using underwater drones and robots to go where humans can't, especially around Antarctica. This week's cultural ambassador, Malia Johnston, talks about the role staging, lights and sound play in bringing dance to life. Episode 3 of Kei Roto Itamiro, Inside the Bubble, remembers how we went to school during lockdown. And the Australian sportscaster Shannon Byrne is on the line from Darwin on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland partly cloudy, rain developing tomorrow morning. Heavy, possibly thundery from the afternoon, then easing at night. Auckland to Taranaki, Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Cloudy periods, isolated light showers. Rain spreading south from tomorrow afternoon with heavy falls possible later in the day. Gisborne to Wairarapa, Whanganui and Taihape to Wellington, also Buller, Nelson and Marlborough. Mainly fine with high cloud. Isolated showers in the west tonight, cloud increasing tomorrow with scattered rain spreading south from late afternoon, more widespread about Golden Bay and the Marlborough Sound. Westland and Fiordland, cloudy periods and a few showers, more frequent south of Haast. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mainly fine with high cloud at times, a few showers about Stewart Island tonight. Chatham Islands, mainly fine. RNZ National. It's coming up to 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen Takawingwa. Emotions ran high at airports across the country today, with Wellington, Christchurch and Queenstown airports welcoming their first international passenger flights in almost 400 days. The Trans-Tasman bubble, expected to deliver a $1 billion boost to the economy, is officially open. That meant 5,000 passengers were able to travel freely between here and Australia today without the need to quarantine. Visual journalists Samuel Rilstone and Dom Thomas were at Wellington Airport to witness what Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern described as akin to scenes from the movie Love Actually.
A moving porphyry to welcome Air New Zealand Flight NZ 246 in Wellington this afternoon. The first international passenger flight to touch down in the capital in more than a year. Emotions ran high for those waiting at the arrival gate, eager for long overdue hugs as a live video link showed the new arrivals entering the terminal. John Garside was one of the first through the arrival gate, having returned from a month-long trip to Australia for his daughter's wedding.
Oh, magnificent. We thought it was 4 weeks quarantine, now none, so fantastic.
How was it like?
Yeah. Great, very friendly. A couple of champagnes helped, so it was very nice.
Ronnie Percy was reunited with her son Alistair, who lives in Australia. She hasn't seen him for 15 months.
I haven't slept for a week. I've been smiling every night in bed.
Oh, great. Yeah, really good. Had a great time. Yeah. Lots of cheering and lots of clapping on the way. So happy to be back.
Peter also works in Sydney. Pre-COVID, he would come home to New Zealand 3 or 4 times a year. He was here just 3 months ago for a visit. But this time, there's no managed isolation.
But this is so much more exciting to actually be welcomed in. So it's better than going into a hotel, you know. It's very eerie when doing that. So, yeah, it's good. Got all my nieces and nephews here, so, yeah.
Waiting for the rest of the Trans-Tasman travellers to come out, Rachel's come to the airport with her mum to meet her sister Laura, who is celebrating her birthday today. They haven't seen each other since a family holiday in Australia in January last year.
Really excited. We've had gone through a lot of stuff, I guess, since the lockdown happened, and it would just be amazing to see Laura and then eventually Zoe again. But yeah, so I think she's really looking forward to coming home. So it'll be quite an emotional reunion, I imagine. Same with you?
Yeah, ditto.
And what are the big birthday plans?
Mum's going to cook Laura's favourite dish, which is schnitzel.
Madison Turley last saw her sister and brother-in-law in December 2019. Today she's come to be reunited and see her 1-year-old niece in person for the first time.
Oh, it just means so much. You sort of miss them every day and you can't do anything to see them. It's sort of missing a part of your life in a way. You can't go there all the time, but yeah, no, it means heaps.
Judy's grandson is studying in Sydney. News of the bubble means a long-awaited catch-up for his second week of university holidays.
Oh, I just want to give him a big hug. Yeah, see how much more he's grown. Yeah, so it's lovely.
Gabriel Lau's daughter Isabella is at university in Sydney. He's flown up from his home in Dunedin to see her for the first time since she went back to Australia to study last August.
My mother's having her 80th birthday tomorrow, so she's coming back for that, for her grandmother's birthday. Yeah. Yes.
He says he's not too concerned if Isabella gets stuck here in the event of another lockdown.
She did find a struggle when she went to Australia because their lockdown is a lot, or their quarantine's a lot stricter. So she struggled with that a little bit because, they're basically locked in a room for 2 weeks. Whereas I think we're a bit more civilised in New Zealand, if that's the right word.
Diane Trotman couldn't wait to hug all her grandchildren, running from the arrival gate.
Amazing. Amazing. It's nothing like Zoom.
Meanwhile, the first international passengers from Australia landed in Christchurch from Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane this afternoon. There are expected to be 400 trans-Tasman flights between Australia and New Zealand this week, compared with just 36 for the first week of April. For Checkpoint, Samuel Rillstone.
And if you were listening to Samuel and Dom's piece rather than watching, we'll put the video up on our Facebook page. Lots of delighted people in it. And flights continue to arrive at Auckland Airport this evening. Checkpoint's Nick Trubridge has spent the day watching tearful reunions.
Hi Lisa, well at my last cross I was talking about that flight from Sydney that's just arrived, and we've managed to grab some of the people that have just come off this flight. This is Sasha, we've got Sasha's mother Lynn, we've got stepfather Peter, I believe, and Auntie Claire. Sasha's just got in on that flight. Sasha, a Kiwi living in Australia.
Yes.
How does it feel to be home?
Amazing and such a relief. It's been a very long year, very emotional year, and I'm just so happy to be back. I don't know if it's sunken in yet, but so happy to be here.
There was a big hug when you saw your mother. When was the last time you saw her?
Well over a year ago.
Yeah. Last February.
Yeah. So very, very, relieved to be back and spend some good quality time with family.
Lynn, you've got the balloon. I saw you holding up that balloon in the back of our shop before. How does it feel? Your daughter's home?
Absolutely delighted. We've been waiting for this for such a long time. I was over visiting my daughter and the grandkids in February of 2020, so it has been a long time, but just super delighted to have you home and love you so much.
Love you too.
Yeah.
And that was our reporter Nick Trubridge, who's with our camera operator Nick Monroe out at the airport as people are still trickling in from the first day of the Trans-Tasman bubble. Again, we'll put the video up online so you can check it out if you were listening. Some feedback on the bubble. This person says, so glad for people with family in Australia. Our family is in France. I can't wait for the day I can see my elderly parents again and they can see their grandkids. Gillian in Dunedin's got in touch too to say travel bubbles are wonderful and the joy of these people reuniting is very special. But let's not forget that many people can't afford to travel, having lost jobs, etc. So this is also tinged with sadness. Good point, Gillian. And another listener has got in touch to say, so the middle class can cross oceans again. The poor still endure their poverty bubble. Thanks for getting in touch with your feedback. It is, well, it's almost 15 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The trial of 3 men charged with orchestrating an international cocaine importation ring began in the High Court at Auckland today. The European trio are facing 7 charges relating to 4 kilograms of the Class A drug allegedly shipped here from South America. John Bond reports.
It's a story that could be straight out of the movies. A group of men from all over the world flying in and out of New Zealand with one thing in mind, to import millions of dollars worth of cocaine and make a fortune. That's the Crown case. Here's the prosecutor, Sam Teppert.
The Crown says that each of the 3 defendants, that's Mr. Sharushev, Mr. Wilk, Mr. Lukasik all played important roles and different roles in ensuring the cocaine was imported into New Zealand and supplied to others.
New Zealand's high drug prices make it an attractive destination for drug smuggling. In short, the Crown case is Alexander Cherushev, a Russian sailor, arrived by boat with the cocaine. Rysard Wilk flew from Poland with his son and received the cocaine from the sailor to offload it elsewhere. And Patrick Lukashek, who arrived later from the UK, handled the money. The problem was they weren't as covert as they thought.
Police had been alerted to the fact that the Wilks may be up to no good and began intercepting communications made from their mobile phones. You'll get to listen and read some of these communications, which the Crown say show drug dealing.
Having their phones tapped meant the police knew where they were meeting, and despite the money involved, their meetings weren't exactly glamorous.
On the 13th of September 2016, the Crown says that the Wilks met with Mr Cherushev in the car park at the New World supermarket in Mount Maunganui, where they discussed this debt that was owed to Mr Cherushev.
But the police never actually saw any cocaine changing hands. Mr Teppert told the jury that could be inferred from the content of the messages. All three men deny the charges. Annabelle Ives, the defence lawyer for Rysard Wilk, described the Crown's case that there was mammoth amounts of cocaine as tenuous.
At the end of the day, there was 3.6 grams of cocaine located on the 4th of August in a public reserve 4 months after my client left New Zealand.
Ron Mansfield for Mr Cherushev said the Crown's theory is just that.
There is a chasm, folks, between what the evidence establishes and what the Crown theory of this case is.
3 other men have already pleaded guilty to charges relating to this. They include Rysard Wilk's son, Ralph, for supplying cocaine. Police found $40,000 cash in noodle packets in his suitcase as he flew out. 2 others, Brian Williams and Mohammed Khan, pleaded guilty to money laundering. The trial before Justice Walker and a jury of 7 women and 5 men continues. For Checkpoint, Jordan Bond.
Fishing guides have been left with little to no business post-COVID, saying the Trans-Tasman bubble has come too late to make a difference this season. There are about 130 guides registered with the country's largest professional association, and about 90% of their clients come from overseas. It's thought a few incoming Australian anglers could create business for some, but not enough to recover from a disastrous season. Hugo Cameron reports.
Usually New Zealand's rivers and lakes are swimming with overseas anglers, hoping to hook a trophy trout, with help from an expert guide. While locals might be enjoying the peace and quiet, those who depend upon the tourist trade are struggling. Martin Langlands has guided on Canterbury waters for 30 years now. He's had a few tough seasons under his belt, but this one has been remarkably bad.
On a regular year, probably 95% of my clients are overseas. So, yeah, we've fundamentally missed this whole season. You know, I've managed to survive, but generally it's been very hard.
He's been teaching casting and selling hand-tied fishing flies to keep afloat. Serge Bonnefox is the president of the Professional Fishing Guides Association. He says without international clients, many guides have no choice but to look for other work.
For the young families who have 1, 2 or 3 kids, have a mortgage, it's a disaster. We have some of our guides who have been doing nothing this year but finding jobs at the local Bunnings or Mitre 10, getting other jobs as builders because they just didn't get any business.
Aussie anglers are itching to get even a day or two fishing in New Zealand, but the timing of the Trans-Tasman bubble means they're arriving just before most of the prime water closes up. Even though the bubble won't save the season, Martin Langland says it's better late than never.
Well, it's coming in at the end of the season, so it's not going to probably help most of us this season, but it certainly shines a light for us of optimism more for next season.
While guides are suffering from a big drop in business, costs for things like insurance and keeping on top of regulations haven't gone away. Serge Bonnefox says more support is needed.
So we would hope that somewhere, somehow, whether it's coming from the Ministry of Finances or Ministry for Tourism, we would have some help getting us through another probably bleak season.
And it's not just guided fishing struggling with the lack of outdoors tourism. One of the largest game hunting estates in New Zealand, High Peak Station, is facing a second year with well over $1 million drop in revenue. High Peak partner Simon Gould says the Trans-Tasman bubble is giving them a bit of mid-season hope, but it won't bring in the big bucks.
We're basically just trying to keep some revenue coming in to keep the bank happy. If we can do well out of it, that's great, but it's the metrics are just not in our favour. Australians will spend more than Kiwis, but they won't spend anything like Americans. There's a lot less of them.
Operators are hopeful the tourism bubble can keep growing to bring in some keen hunters and fishers and some much-needed cash. For Checkpoint, ko Hugo Cameron tēnei.
As the Trans-Tasman bubble gets underway, the Australian tourism industry wants a timetable for the return of more international travellers. However, it has welcomed as a first step the Prime Minister's comments that he hopes vaccinated Australians can travel for essential purposes by the end of the year. Here's the ABC's Annie Guest.
At this South Brisbane playground, parents are watching their children attentively. And eyes are also on life beyond the pandemic, with some thinking about overseas travel.
I think once you've been vaccinated, I guess it's at your own risk, but you're protecting yourself and other people. So, I support the idea.
As long as they monitor it and see that it's safe, then why not?
The Prime Minister says Australia is in no hurry to fully reopen international borders, but he hopes vaccinated Australians can travel for essential purposes by year's end, using home quarantine on their return.
I don't know. It all depends on whether the vaccination is proven effective. We need to wait till it's proven effective.
Yeah, proven effective, as he said, and then also, is that country vaccinated too?
These concerns are shared by strategic health policy expert Bill Botel, an adjunct professor at UNSW.
We cannot have a situation in Australia this year where the fortunate few who are going to be vaccinated are allowed to travel to COVID-endemic countries and to come back and put themselves into home quarantine and bypass hotel quarantine, while the vast majority of Australians are not vaccinated.
If essential travel is allowed for those who are vaccinated, how big is the risk of an outbreak?
Much greater than it is now.
Scott Morrison's idea of a limited border reopening later this year is welcomed by the tourism industry as a good step, following on from the Trans-Tasman bubble starting today. But beyond that, the $50 billion a year industry is desperate for a plan.
We get it that with the change in the vaccination timetable in terms of covering Australians, it's obviously been delayed and will take a lot longer.
Simon Westaway is the Executive Director of the Australian Tourism Industry Council.
Now is a time in the coming weeks for government, perhaps pre-budget, to sit down with industry and work through and explain to us where they see the timeline, where they see the timetable, and how we can get a two-way exchange of visitors occurring, particularly out of Asia back into Australia.
And without that level of communication around plans and targets, where does that leave your industry?
Well, the difficulty is without clear advice and clear communication, we'll continue to have a lot of challenges in our sector.
And that report was by Annie Guest. Alexei Navalny's supporters say the Kremlin critic could die at any moment and that he's being killed in front of the whole world. Moscow is coming under increasing pressure, both at home and abroad, regarding its treatment of Mr. Navalny in prison. He's on a hunger strike and European leaders have expressed alarm over his deteriorating health. Here's the BBC's Courtney Bembridge.
Alexei Navalny has been on hunger strike since the end of March, protesting because he's being refused access to his medical team. His personal doctor tweeted this video saying she and 3 other doctors stood for 2 hours and begged to be let into the jail, but they were refused entry. The doctors say recent blood test results indicate Navalny could go into cardiac arrest at any moment. And this was the message from his top aides.
Have you ever seen with your own eyes how someone is killed? Yes, you have. You are seeing it right now. Whatever the urge to pull away from it, change the subject. That doesn't negate the fact that Alexei Navalny is being killed in a terrible way and in front of everyone's eyes.
But Russia's ambassador to the UK says that's not going to happen.
Of course, he will not be allowed to die in prison, but I can say that Mr. Navalny, he behaves like a hooligan, absolutely, in trying to violate every rule that has been established. His purpose of all of that is to attract attention.
Navalny was arrested in January when he returned to Russia after a near-fatal poisoning attack, which he says was orchestrated by the Kremlin. It denies the allegation. The US has warned there will be consequences if Mr. Navalny dies, and the EU's top diplomat tweeted that he was deeply concerned and again called for Navalny's immediate and unconditional release. It comes amid rising tensions between Moscow and the West over a litany of issues, including Russia's troop build-up on Ukraine's border.
I think we have to define clear red lines with Russia. This is the only way to be credible. I think that sanctions are not sufficient in themselves, but sanctions are part of the package.
EU foreign ministers are expected to discuss Navalny's plight on Monday.
And that was Courtney Bembridge reporting there. Now for the story of a 91-year-old cop who is still on the beat in the US. Elsie Buckshot Smith has worked in law enforcement for more than 56 years and says he'll only retire when the good Lord decides it's his time. CNN's Martin Savage reports.
When Officer Elsie Buckshot Smith
how y'all doing?
Says he knows almost everyone in Camden, Arkansas.
Hey, Benny.
Hey, what's going on? Population 11,000.
Good to see y'all.
It's true.
All right.
At 91, he spent more time protecting and serving than many residents have been alive. 56 years.
You ever missed a day of work? No. Not. Just take off.
For more than 4 decades, he was a deputy with the Ouachita County Sheriff's Department.
First time you retired, how long did that last? 30 days. 30 days.
So, in his 80s, he became a rookie cop on the Camden Police Department.
I love to meet people, help people, and do things for people.
Chief Boyd Woody is Buckshot's boss.
So my first year in law enforcement in the jail, and Mr. Smith was my supervisor. He was over the jail at that time.
So he was your boss?
He was my boss, yeah.
Officer Smith starts each day at 7 a.m.
But I check in 15 to 20 minutes ahead of time. You're always early. Somehow I'm not surprised.
Patrolling neighborhoods, escorting school buses, investigations.
How many arrests have you made? I've taken more people home than I arrested. Took to jail. So you try to come up with another way. Yeah.
Role model, just maybe, Officer Smith's most important job, especially to younger officers.
Some of them come looking at policing as they saw it on TV, looking at policing as they see it in a big city. This is a community.
I tell them all, this badge and gun don't make no police officer. You got to respect folks. I want to be treated right, and I figure you want to be treated right.
Next month, Officer Smith will turn 92. The town's planning a parade.
Do you ever think you will retire? When the good Lord says so.
And that report was from CNN's Martin Savage. Now, before we head off for the evening, something incredibly special on the bubble. Airports on both sides of the Tasman have marked quarantine-free travel between Australia and New Zealand. You know, they've had some staff, songs, dancers, drag queens and more. But at Melbourne Airport, it was an interpretive dance troupe that's caught the eye of many on social media. So we've got a bit of that for you now, I think, that we're going to play. And for those of you who are listening, let me describe it. They're dressed, the dancers, in what we would call, I don't know, black onesies. And they've got these giant, they appear to be helium-inflated balloons attached to them by strings. And there's some slick moves going on. It brought us great joy in the checkpoint office this afternoon. We may have done a couple of reenactments, not quite as good as what I'm witnessing here. But really do check it out. There could be a TikTok in the brew from the checkpoint team, if you are lucky. If they were really committed, though, they'd be in Zorbs.
Headlines at 6:30. The Prime Minister says New Zealand and Australia both have the tools to safely manage any problems that could surface from the Trans-Tasman travel bubble. Foreign Affairs Minister Nanaia Mahuta has called for diversification of trade so the country